Chrissie Cuming Walters. And Chrissie had just come, as I say, we'd just come back to the UK, the land of tea and scones and scones and Victoria sponges. And so you were just telling us about you'd gone to UCL.
Yep.
And had complete or gone and done a master's, which then allowed you to practice law in the UK, and more important to stay. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it literally had no impact at all on my ability to practice in the UK.
Oh right.
Yeah, I mean that was entirely down to the SRA. So the whole point of doing the masters really was, well, there were a couple of points to it. The first was that I didn't know anybody here, so it was I'm very academically minded, always have been. I kind of thrive in that sort of environment. So the thought process was, this will give me sort of instant connection to the land, to England, to people there, give me a network of friends and associates and what have you. In the first instance. In the second instance, it gets me into the country legally. It also, at the time, they had the highly skilled migrant program as it was. And so I could bunny hop the year and go back to sort of earnings and all of that sort of stuff from Philadelphia, from Deckett and Pepper Hamilton, rather than sort of having to claim no income whatsoever for the tiering and for the points that they had as a process then. So I'd be able to stay in the country myself without having to either find a partner or having to get somebody who would sponsor me for a work visa, or anything like that. So it was all very sort of long-term, forward-looking. The different steps that I took at the time, because though I told my parents that I was going to stay for 4 years and then take an educated review of the situation, I really didn't have any intention of returning when I came. But have the option if everything goes very wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, never burn those bridges, I always say. So it strikes me actually, Chrissie, that you're very you seem to be very forward thinking and always planning the next move, which is obviously a great thing for someone in your legal profession. So bring us up to date. Tell us exactly how. So how are you where you are right now? Are you specializing in family law?
Yep, that's it. So I mean, things work quite differently here than they do in the States. In the US, generally speaking, you are a general practitioner, and you're expected to have knowledge of sort of all areas of the law. And there are tremendous hoops that one has to go to in order to claim to be a specialist in any area. And that's generally reserved for people who do tax, for the most part, over there. Whereas over here, everyone is a specialist. So do beware, buyer beware. Everyone is a specialist here. And can claim to be a specialist without really not having any specialization whatsoever, just because of the way that the system works. So you do the training contract, you qualify into a department if you're in a larger firm or into a particular area of practice. And generally speaking, that is it. That is what you're going to do, and woe betide you if you try to do anything else. So it is sort of not to be in any way sort of negative or denigrating, but it is sort of a one-trick pony sort of situation. You learn family law. You don't necessarily, though you may have touched on other things in your bar review courses, if you're, counsel or, at the LPC or whatever sort of deviation of those things that you may have done. It is literally, once you are trained in an area, that's your box. That's your box. And it's incredibly difficult unless you sort of hang your own shingle to do something else. I did not really understand that. Similarly to I knew that there was sort of a a divide in the profession between, you know, barristers and solicitors, but I didn't necessarily appreciate what that meant in day-to-day practice, and quite quickly decided that I had gone the wrong route.
Was that reversible, or?
Well, I mean, so I did actually try to go to the bar quite a few times shortly after I became a solicitor, because because of my US practice, I did the qualified lawyer's transfer test.
Right.
And I only really had to do 3 months worth of work experience, but I chose to do a training contract because I wasn't so vain as to think that I knew everything. And, you know, I knew that I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the judges. I didn't know the procedure. I didn't know sort of the local, you know, ins and outs, and, you know, the chit chat to this court clerk and that clerk. And just, you know, I didn't know any of that. And that can be extremely valuable, which I recognized. So I did the training contract with Dawson Cornwell, which created the specialism, as it were, in family law. And that's it. That's all that I did while I was there. And while I was there, and probably for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years after, I did apply not to transfer to the bar, but I did apply to pupilages, just to see if I could change, really.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, I'm just too bloody American. They didn't want me. I mean, you know, I got to second round interviews, but, you know, which in and of itself is meant to be sort of, you know, a huge accomplishment just to get to second round pupillage interviews. But, you know, I never quite got over that final hurdle, and I think a lot of it really comes down to what now is a huge selling point for me, which is the fact that I am different. Yeah. You know, my moniker on Instagram, and, you know, the hashtags and all that sort of rubbish that I use. I hate social media, but, you know, those things is divorced with a difference. And you know, and one of my draws for clients in particular is that I am a maverick. I'm known as being a maverick, and that's great as a solicitor, but it doesn't get you to the bar.
No. No,
you don't want any mavericks.
no, that's true.
At least, particularly when you're applying for pupillage. Maybe later, you know, because
after you've got there.
I'm sure loads would say that Mostyn is a maverick. I don't know whether or not he'd refer to himself that way. But you know, when you're sort of at the start, that's not good.
You have to conform.
You have to conform, and that is the exact area where I have always fallen down.
No, boy, you know your own mind. Now, I'm sorry, Chrissie, you're going to have to prepare yourself now for a couple of probably incredibly dumb questions.
Okay.
But the burning question I have is are there big differences between the law in the States and the law in the UK? Bearing in mind, because I could be getting totally wrong, but I'm guessing some of the basis of the legal system might have come from the UK initially in the States.
Yeah, it did. So, I mean, it kind of depends on which laws you're talking about, because one of the tricky things with the States is that each state has its own set of laws. So you've got
really.
So you've got federal, and then you've got state laws,
Right.
and you know, and there is a bit of mirroring that goes on there, because, you know, the common law in the States does follow very closely, you know, sort of the traditional law, as it were, of England, because obviously that's where it came from. I mean, unless you're talking about Louisiana, who's still under Napoleonic Code, you know, because, well, that's super fun. You know, and just sort of like bizarre nuances like that. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're both English-speaking Western civilizations. You know, there are going to be a lot of commonalities. You know, if you want to sort of dive into, you know, things like child custody, as they refer to it in the States, or, you know, residence or child arrangements, as we refer to it over here, you know, nuptial agreements and whether or not they're binding, you know, common law division of assets, or, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, actually. Another question that I know people ask, or that maybe an assumption that they make all the time is, and I think I asked you this once before, so is there any such thing as common law in the UK?
No.
See, so I wonder where that came about, because it's so even
There
even a
used to
member of my
be.
family said it last year. They said, "Oh, well, they've
Yeah.
been living together, or they've been living together for X amount of years," and it's like,
no, actually, that would probably be a good sort of, I don't know, thesis or dissertation or something like that, because there is this
I'm here to help.
There is this sort of bizarre but very express belief that there is such a thing as common law marriage. And what was it the other day? I was filling out a form the other day, and it actually asked me if I was a common law partner. And I about lost my wig because it was something that was quite official. Oh God, I wish. Hopefully, it will come to me before this is done, because whatever it is, it needs to be corrected. But I mean, and that's part of the difficulty, is that not only is it a myth, but it is a myth that is promulgated in society, and in forms that you fill out, and and questions that you get. I think it was car insurance on Compare the Meerkat. It was Compare the Meerkat. Yeah.
Oh, well, they're Russian, aren't they? Those Russian meerkats, what do they know?
Those meerkats, what do they know? So yeah, but I mean, but because of that, it does sort of continue it, but it's been something that has been abolished in this country for hundreds of years. And it simply doesn't exist. And I know that there was, I mean, I read this years ago, something about, like, if you'd been together for X amount of time. I mean, there was actually like almost a formula to it. If you've been together for X amount of time, or if you just decided to start using your partner's name, like with or without their consent, obviously, that would constitute a common law marriage, and that would avail you of some sort of rights or what have you. But no, it is absolutely 100% a myth, and it's a very dangerous and damaging myth, because people do vehemently believe it, and sometimes when questioned on it can become quite defensive about it. But at the end of the day, if you are living together, even if you live together as if you were husband and wife, or husband and husband, or wife and wife, and you've bought property together, you've commingled your assets together, you've had children together, etc., doesn't mean anything in this country unless you are actually married, apart from the obligation to maintain one's children.
That overarches everything.
So
yeah, that's good. I'm glad about that.
So there are so there's this thing called Talata. It's one of my favorite things, because it's very litigious. I do love a Talata case. It is a highly specialized area. There are lots of family law practitioners who say that they do it, who've probably never really touched one, and it's a whole different set of rules than what family law practitioners usually use, because it's civil. So it's a white book, as we call it, rather than the red book. It does actually make a difference. But in any event, the Trust of Land and Appointment of Trustees Act comes into play when you're talking about cohabiting couples who are living together, have purchased property together, but are not married. And it's a growing area of practice. It's one that I've been doing for donkeys. Like I said, I love it. But it's growing incrementally, because you've got a lot of people who are now choosing, for whatever reason, to live together rather than to marry. And what can happen is, particularly a financially disadvantaged party to the relationship will think that they've got these rights and privileges and what have you, by virtue of the living together in the house, and treating it as their home, and having children together, and then the relationship breaks down, and they realize that that they don't have these rights, and it can be really very devastating. So there is a question as to intent. There is a question as to promises and reliance, and how you used your funds, and things that were said, and the things that was written, and and there's lots of different things that can come into play with it, that can actually create an interest in the property on trust, hence the Trust of Land, that isn't necessarily on the title. So, it's one way of sort of helping, as it were, in that situation, or hurting, depending on who you act for.
And I'm guessing as well, it's more prevalent because people, people do get divorced, and then they say they might have a property, and then they'll start living with someone else, and then they'll sell that property, and then but they're just living together as opposed to anything else. It's how do you carve? It's how you carve up those differences, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, at some point in the future, hopefully, I will do sort of a YouTube that is generally a string of public service announcements, like,
that'd be good.
Yeah, like, don't put your cart before the horse. Finish one relationship before you start the next.
Now that's good advice.
Because it's not just the emotional toll that goes into it, because the emotional toll can be huge.
Yeah.
But it's the money. When you start mixing these things, when you've not dealt with relationship A and you've started relationship B, and the amount of cost that starts getting racked up in those sorts of situations can just literally go through the roof, because you've got to deal with the interests of the marriage or the relationship that's broken down, and balance those against the interests that are being created in the relationship that's there now, and it can be really nasty. If you want to talk about people trying to remain amicable and mediate or arbitrate, or private FD, or whatever sort of alternative dispute resolution you might want to consider, chances are, when you've got that level of cross mingling and acrimony that's just going to naturally be built in because of the way that things have been handled and dealt with, chances are you're going to court, and chances are it's going to get really expensive, because you've got to pick apart all of these different things. And that's something as well. People. I think there's an element of going, well, if I get divorced, it'll be really, really expensive. I heard somebody throw a figure at me the other day. It might just be me. Maybe I need to start charging more.
Double your prices.
At least double my prices. They're like, oh, well, divorce costs like $300,000, and I was like, really? Cool. Because then I can get my mini mansion and be done with it.
Tell my wife.
I've never had a case where I have charged $300,000. Even going to fully contested final hearing with experts involved, with jurisdictional issues, I've never had it, and I don't really, I have to say, understand why or how the costs get to that level. I'm sure that in some of the ultra high net worth cases where you're talking about, expansive business interests and, trusts and Jersey trusts and third party interests and inheritance and ring fencing and all these other things that can come into it. I can kind of maybe understand in those circumstances why the cost can get to that level and higher. But when you're talking about sort of not run of the mill, because, it's everybody's circumstances is different and of extreme importance to them. But, when you're talking about sort of, reasonably net worth people, middle class people going through a divorce, I don't see any reason why it should cost that much. I just don't. But again, maybe I'm doing something wrong and I need to be charging more and creating applications for no reason.
That's interesting. So that leads me nicely on to my next question, which is like, what would working with Chrissie look like? And then also, if you had a client, or have you had clients where they are so stuck in their belief, you're saying to them, no, that's not the actual truth, yet they want to act in a certain way. But what does working with you look like, first of all?
Well, working with me, you work with me, right? And that's something to bear in mind, because the way that I work is it is me. I am the one responding to the emails. I am the one answering the phone. I am the one who's doing the advice. I am I am there. I am your tribe. right? It's me and any of the other professionals that I tend to work with, such as financial advisors and things like that, and sometimes divorce coaches. We are the tribe. We are your team. We are there for you. You get me. You don't get my assistant. You don't get my secretary. You don't get, on very rare occasions, I will use paralegals or juniors, but you'll know about it. And it's usually for something like lodging something at court or preparing the court bundle. It's routine stuff,
small stuff. Yeah.
It's not the everyday substantive stuff. Which is important to note, because there are lots of firms where you will speak to the partner and you'll hire the partner and you'll get the assistant.
Yeah.
Or you'll get the partner and 3 assistants, and you're paying for all of them, which might be why it's 300 grand.
So, yeah, because they'll all charge their extra element.
Because they're all charging. So if you hire a firm and it's the partner, the paralegal, and 2 assistants, and they're getting copied on all the emails, each one of them is time recording for those emails. So you're getting charged for each one of them having sight of that. And that's one way that costs can really rack up unnecessarily. But when it's me, it's me. I pull no punches, as you can probably tell.
kind of got that. That's a good thing. I think that's a great thing.
I will at all times tell you where you stand, where I think you stand, whether I think you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, or the impact it can have. And I know that there are lots of solicitors out there, unfortunately, who will act as basically just mouthpieces for their clients. That's not me. And if that's what you want, I'm not your lawyer. So, if you want somebody who is going to absolutely vehemently act in your best interests and try to get you the best outcome, in the most cost-effective way for you and your kids to move forward to your new future in a way that you've not seen before, maybe, but to really sort of get you through and get you to the other side, then I'm your girl. But, cool. Otherwise, I'm not your girl.
No,
that's cool. That's cool.
I think your honesty, and anyone who's just been watching this interview is going to, that's the thing. It just stands out a mile that, you'd never pull your punches, and you'll call a spade, and that is it. So, okay, my next question then obviously is are you open to receiving new clients? We've got your email address running along the ticker at the bottom. So I mean,
so I do tend to control the number of active cases that I have.
That's what I thought.
I am at a point in my professional career where I have sort of the liberty, as it were, to run my cases how I want to run my cases, to take on clients that I want to take on, and to not take on clients that I don't think that I'm going to be able to work with very well. Because at the end of the day, it is a working relationship. As I said, I'm not the mouthpiece, and you've got to trust me, but I also have to trust you. And it is sort of this rapport, and I'm going to end up knowing all sorts of very personal things that you probably wouldn't even tell, a very, very good friend. And so you've got to have this trust, and you've got to have this sort of mutual understanding. And if that's not there, then it's not the right relationship. No. So I do initial consultations for a few reasons. The first is, obviously, clients find it tremendously helpful to be able to, have that sort of, without having to sign on the line, as it were. To have that initial chat, to get some clarity as to where they may stand, and, what the process is, and what, the associated costs may be, and that sort of thing. But also, for us, both of us, me and the client, to get that feel as to whether or not we're going to be a good fit. Because there's thousands and thousands of family lawyers out there, and if it's not the right fit, that's fine. I'm not going to be right for everybody, and that's cool. That's part of being an average.
Just have exactly. I can't believe anyone wouldn't want to work with you. I wouldn't. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't get divorced just to work with you, but
well, I mean, one of my lovely clients, once said, and it's on my website actually, because I do have my own website just for self promotion
Oh,
as
yeah.
well. But yeah, he said because I knew that he had done a glamour parade. That's what we call it when you talk to a whole bunch of different solicitors at the start to figure out who you want to instruct.
Yeah.
And I knew that he'd done a bit of a glamour parade, and I said to him, I said, well, why did you choose me? I know that you talked to others. Why did you choose me? And he said, just boom. He's like, because I knew I didn't want you on the other side.
Oh, that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
And I was like, smart cookie you are.
Yeah, you have chosen wisely.
You've chosen wisely, young Padawan. So, I mean, obviously, I didn't tell him that I would have been conflicted out. But
yeah, but the principles
that would have lost the moment. It would have lost the moment. It would have, but
actually, that's a good point. Actually, Joe. So even though actually, my question was going to be, so do you have to take an oath of honesty? A little like doctors take the Hippocratic oath, and then my GP doctor sister said, no, we don't take that oath whatsoever.
Well, I mean, oath might be a bit of a strong word, but
an undertaking.
Pretty much. So there is built into the professional code of conduct an obligation to be honest, and to not misrepresent things, including yourself and the legal profession as a whole. We're meant to sort of bolster the view of the legal profession in the eyes of the public and what have you. And honesty does play directly into that, and it's there sort of right at the very start of the recitals. Excuse me, of the professional code of conduct as they've rewritten it. And we actually have an obligation to sort of report each other, and which is a bit uncomfortable as a solicitor, but to report each other if we feel that there's been like a gross misrepresentation or a misrepresentation that would make a member of the public sort of maybe change their view of the profession or practitioners, what have you. We have to report that to the SRA as well. So, if somebody says something in correspondence, and I'm like, well, that's just an absolute gross misrepresentation of what was said or done or whatever. I actually have to report that to my compliance officer to see if it's something that's reportable to the SRA.
Oh wow! So, that's a good self-policing mechanism. Then.
Yeah, I mean, and that is you're spot on. That's exactly what it's for. Is self-policing. It actually, excuse me, I've got a bit of frog in my throat now. It actually sort of mimics what they do in the States. In most of sort of the different jurisdictions in the US, there's sort of a positive self-policing requirement that's there in their professional rules as well.
Oh, fantastic! Well, that's interesting. Well, listen, you've got your own website, so we'll put all the links, your email address that we've got down there, and all the links to how to get in touch with you in the comments and in the show notes and in the descriptions wherever we post the videos after we finished our live chat. So, if you just tell us so that's like working with you. So, how do you see two things really? How do you see the future? And before you come on to that, have you seen any differences? Any changes because of our current COVID situation? Can you see that making more or less? And then how do you see your future? Because you've got your little girl, your husband.
Yeah.
What's up for Chrissie coming forwards?
Well, I mean, hopefully, we keep on ticking on, as it were. I don't know what I've just done in my hair.
Yeah, no, it looks cool.
It's like backwards from what I'm looking. Anyway, so there's been quite a spike in divorces and inquiries and child arrangements issues and what have you that have happened sort of around the 1st of June and over the summer months. It's kind of leveling out a bit now. It's likely to spike again sort of over Christmas towards New Year, because it's one of those sort of people are in a pressure cooker during these different times, and that can show itself in a variety of different ways. So at the moment, knock on wood, feeling extremely fortunate to be where I am and doing what I'm doing, and obviously it's not just down to me. I'm eternally grateful, to whichever God you wish to choose, and to so many people who have positively impacted on my life, and also those who have negatively impacted on it as well. Wouldn't be here without you either, mate.
That's what makes us, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. It absolutely is. It's the myriad of life experiences, and so. But the family court system, for all of its faults, and of which are highly publicized on a regular basis, I did have a sort of a breakfast meeting, as it were, with the president of the family division this morning, Sir Andrew McFarlane, talking about family courts and COVID, and sort of how we see that progressing, how he sees that progressing, and that sort of thing. By way of sort of a more informal CPD, and he said some very remarkable and encouraging things about the family court system, and how we've actually coped. Because on the ground we see it, as we see it, because we're in it, and we're and you keep going, and you deal with the delays, and you deal with the full inboxes rejecting your application, and those sorts of things. Which can be really quite frustrating, but what he said was that we have functioned and we have coped better than almost all the other than the other practice areas, and the other aspects of the justice system, that we've shown the flexibility, we've shown the go-to attitude, and we've literally just kept going, and it's not sort of lip service either. He said the judges have had more sitting days this year than what they did last year.
Oh wow!
Because we're doing it remotely, and so you can do 4 directions hearings sitting at your desk, at your table, at your whatever, in your cupboard, and do them sort of boom, 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 because you're not traveling here, you're not traveling there, you don't have bags of papers to lug around and all of that. So there is actually an economy there, as well. Doesn't work in all circumstances, obviously. But at the end of the day, it is working, and we are working, and cases are going ahead, and they are progressing, and hearings are happening, and applications are getting issued, and divorces are going through, and we are ticking along reasonably well. I have a case at the moment where there's a multi-jurisdictional issue, there's a cross-jurisdiction issue, and so we've got parallel proceedings. And in the other country, which is an EU country, right? In the other country, they've just stopped. It's like they just sent out notices saying, we're sorry, everything that's not urgent just isn't being dealt with, and we'll get back in touch with you when we decide that it will be. Kind of like, well, okay then. Thanks for that. Really helpful for your legal limbo. Appreciate it. But there's always delays with the family courts. We're always inundated. We're always overloaded. And the lists are incredible in some places. But at the end of the day, it's still going. And we're all still going. And we will keep going. And, and he said, we're going to be going like this for at least the next 6 months. But the reality is that they're looking at keeping remote hearings for routine things, like just, where you're getting directions, which means you're being told what you need to do next, in order to put evidence before the court. Those things might very well just be remote permanently going forward, because it's a much better use of resources and time and costs and everything else to deal with those more routine matters in that way. And so there are bits that we're learning as we're going along to try and make the system work even better.
That's the thing, isn't it? There's always there's always going to be a positive out of a negative, or there's things that suddenly you're doing something, you're forced to do something in a different way, and actually then you go, oh, do you know what? Yeah, that does work really well. So why not keep it? Exactly. Oh, Chrissie, thank you. My apologies for the sound issue earlier. But yeah, we've come to the end of our interview. Is there any other little pearls of wisdom or nuggets that you think people should know before we go?
Get a lawyer. I can't fix it after you've messed it up.
Yeah, and don't sugarcoat it.
deal with themselves. You know, but the reality is there's so many nuances to it, and you will very quickly get led down a garden path if you're looking, you know, on the Facebook divorce groups, and you know, you're looking on, you know, Wikidivorce, and you're looking, you know, you're Googling and what have you. You know, I did used to have it broke, unfortunately, a coffee mug that said, "Don't confuse your Google search with my law degree." Because there's so many different aspects and elements at play, you know, and you've got to have that foresight. We were talking a little bit earlier about, you know, my forward looking. You've got to have that, and you're in such an emotional moment in your life. You're in, you know, you're in this bit of turmoil, you know, usually in some, you know, in a place of darkness, and you know, you can't really see the forest for the trees, and you need to have that professional support there, in order to say, well, but if you agree to that, how are you going to buy a house? You know, or what happens if you can't pay the mortgage? You know, what happens if this? What happens if that? You know, well, what about the school fees? Well, what, you know, what do you mean you're not giving it? You know, you're not going to take a pension share. Of course, you need a pension share. How are you going to retire? You're just going to live off of the state. You know, you know, there's just so many different elements that come into play that need to be addressed, other than just the house. You know, people want to look at the house, and they want to look at the kids. And that sort of, you know, there's blinders there, and doing it in a sort of piecemeal fashion can really be ultimately quite detrimental. And then you come back 2 and 3 years later, you know, going, I need to change it. And you know, it's not that it's impossible, but it's pretty close. Yeah, and there's so many factors, you know, that have to be present in order to even have a shot at being able to change it later. Yeah, the courts want finality on final orders.
Yeah.
They don't want second bites of the cherry, and it can be really, really difficult to fix it if it's gone a bit wrong.
Cool. So there you go. That is the best advice. Actually, I know a friend of mine said, you know, never ever make a decision when you're super stressed, because you know, your thinking is so out of whack. So so there you go. I think that's great advice, Chrissie. And so if you're thinking about going down this path, obviously Chrissie is the lady to go and see. At least then you're going to get the clarity that you need, and all your options will be resolved. Chrissie, thank you for being such a wonderful guest and so patient. I sincerely hope you're going to get another award either later this year or next year, but certainly one that you can actually go and put your ball gown on and have a good time.
I've got to get rid of this COVID weight first before I go putting on a ball gown.
Yeah, tell me. Yes, tell me about it. Cool. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and I really appreciate it. Guys, we are going to be... Oh, thank you. We're going to be back on Tuesday. Where we have the lovely... I forgot her name, but she's lovely. We have two. Actually, no, we got two. The reason I can't remember is because we've got two guests on Tuesday, and I'm going to go. I won't say them because I'm going to confuse them with Thursdays. But we will see you again, Open for Business, on Tuesday 2 and 4, and we also have our special Open for Business USA, where we've got another couple of USA guests on Wednesday evening. So there you go, guys. It's all going, and it's just a privilege to be able to chat to all these wonderful people. Take care.